Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Tonight, we've got something probably a little bit different, but certainly is along the lines of where we're starting to explore when we're really trying to look for new and interesting tech. And we've got some folks on the line tonight that we've been really just kind of dying to talk to here for a little while. We've got Alex Linares, co-founder and CPO of Voice Labs, and Terren Peterson, VP of Development and Engineering, and also an Alexa Dev Champ at Capital One. Why don't we go ahead and get started with you first, Alex? How you doing, first of all?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here with Terren as well.
Yes, absolutely. Terren, how are you tonight?
Good. Great to be able to talk with you both.
Absolutely. And so first of all, you guys don't mind, let's start off with quick introductions and a little bit of backgrounds, please. Alex, why don't you go first?
Great, absolutely. So I'm Alex. I'm the CPO at Voice Labs. Voice Labs is the leader in voice experience analytics for voice-first platforms like Amazon Alexa and Google Home. What that means is we focus on helping top-tier brands and developers build better voice experiences by deeply understanding conversational usage patterns and then working with our customers on retention tactics, how to achieve their goals, and identifying challenges and opportunities, all tailored to this voice-first mode of interaction. So we launched as an analytics partner with Google when they unveiled Actions for Google Home in mid-December. And then Amazon just recently recommended our analytics product to their entire developer community. So we're a self-serve product with hundreds of developers in our community, and we're excited to be in this market. So excited to be here as well.
And Terren, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So I'm actually kind of get to wear two hats. I'm a Alexa developer champion who's been working on the platform for the past year. I've actually created 9 different skills that have gotten published and have competed in different hackathons. And then my day job is that I'm actually head of platform engineering within the retail bank at Capital One, and have plenty of experience working in the cloud.
Very nice, very nice. And yeah, so let's talk a little bit of background here very quickly. So for me personally, I actually received my first Echo Dot actually at AWS conference sponsored by Capital One. But it was actually really nice to see the growth of this area, even just in the 3-4 months. I mean, it is the growth is absolutely crazy, and we'll put a link to the show notes in there. But there's something, Alex, your company Voice Labs put out called the Voice Report, and what was really nice about this was it was a really good overview of the stack, and not just think of it as, hey, this is a consumer grade device, but start to think of it of here's the hardware, here's the AI software, here's the applications, here's how you put together an ecosystem, here's how you go and develop on things like that, and also highlighted some of the use cases and where things could go from there. And that's what we're going to explore more tonight. And just something along the lines of Terren, you said it was 9 published applications, and today Amazon announced, what was it, 10,000?
10,000.
10,000 Alexa skills as of today, and it was 7,000 2 months ago. So that is just insane. So let's talk about this for a little bit. This kind of voice first market or conversational computing, I've heard it referred to. Tell us a little bit more about why this is exploding and where you guys have seen this, because you've obviously have seen this a lot longer than I have.
Yeah, absolutely happy to. I think my macro point of where I would start and how we think about this is that for the first time, machines are adapting to humans versus the other way around. So it's like we've had remote controls, we've had keyboards, we've had glass to tap on to kind of translate human input into machine input. And now for the first time, because of the higher fidelity from an artificial intelligence perspective and understanding, and this new kind of hardware that is ambient, that has far field, technology, it's really able to change the way we interact. And so that's a big deal. if you're a consumer product person, that's a big deal from a potential perspective of what's going to happen next. And I think it's driving a lot of this growth in terms of innovation.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that it's crossed the threshold now. I think we all have experiences with different voice interactive platforms before, and it started to really hit that critical mass of where a voice bot can actually recognize what you're saying, and it can actually do things that normally you would actually have to be doing with a keyboard or hand gestures or other things. That the more that it's now getting to that point where it's not an annoyance, right, to try to say the same thing 3 or 4 different times. That the AI is strong enough that it can actually pick up on different dialects that people have, and really kind of can do some things hands-free, which I think has always been a limitation of keyboard-based devices. But it's just something that it's a limitation of the technology that we've all accepted for the better part of the last 2 decades.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you guys think something I've noticed in my interactions to date? One of the big things though is I still feel like in the use case of Alexa, because that's what I have, or in Amazon's Echo ecosystem, I'm still tied to the companion app. There's still times you still have to go into the companion app, or something as simple as I can't remember the name of that damn skill I wanted to use. And so we can kind of talk about other things there, but how do you get over that first hurdle of that third party interaction of I have these skills, I've enabled these skills that are third-party add-ins like Uber or Domino's or some of these other things, or, I use Pandora all the time. But what about, something as simple as remembering all the skills you've enabled?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge. Sometimes it's good to draw parallels. I kind of feel like that we're like all the way back in 1994, maybe, in early days of sort of primitive web, of where you come across like somebody that built a frames application with like this magenta background that was so painful that it like you actually have to squint at the screen. Like you remember back to like early days of the web, of where like people would think it was really cool to splash a really loud background and then use like yellow font or something crazy. I think that we're
the HTML
right
HTML
now.
blink command.
Yeah. I mean, so if you think of where we're at some point, there's here's what the platform can do, and then here's what the developers as a community are actually building from a skill. And to me, it's going to be interesting to see how long do we actually go forward before, whether it's that there's gaps in the platforms or it's really the quality itself of the skills that we need to start figuring out what are the killer apps for this platform that are really going to take it to the next level, versus just to be in this sort of crazy mode of where we've got a lot of skills right now that are sort of magenta backgrounds and yellow font.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I couldn't agree more. And thanks, Terren, for kind of driving that yellow, green, blinking visual in my brain, because it just really hurt. But I completely agree. I think, if you think about the tenets of a thriving ecosystem, and whether that's the web, whether that's mobile, whether that's social, there's really 4 big parts to it. And, one of them is experience. It has to be a good, memorable experience. You have to have retention hooks. So how do you drive people to come back in a either natural, organic way, or in a way that's things like push notifications for mobile? You need distribution, right? How do you discover new stuff? And then you need monetization. And I think, all good ecosystems kind of have answers for this. And to Terren's point, we're really early in terms of both killer functionality on the experience side, and then there's not too many tools yet on the retention distribution to really help you, drive you back to that experience that you enabled yesterday. I think the platforms are working hard on it, but it's early days, and that's kind of the fun part, kind of being part of, where we are today and defining that. I mean, defining that market and that ecosystem. It's really fun.
Yeah, well, and the retention there is so that is a really big key that I found already just in my experience of something I will do is I've kind of developed this routine in the mornings. My Echo's sitting on the desk in my office, and I'll walk in the mornings and I'll say good morning to it just because there's always something new every day. It's some kind of fun fact or whatever, and I like hearing that. And then it'll do my flash briefing, and I'll kind of run through all of that. And there is some things that are sticky, if you will. But for me right now, the things that are sticky are the things that deliver a new experience every day. But I agree with you completely on how do you develop that ecosystem going forward, without a doubt. So, Terren, let me ask you this. So you're an Alexa Dev Champ. So first of all, let everyone, for those that don't know what that is, tell us what it is, and then give us a sense of your Alexa skills in the framework of Capital One, and what does this hold for the future of Capital One, or your view of the industry in general?
Yeah. So it's a good question. So first of all, the Alexa Champions program, it's a way that Amazon is really trying to build the ecosystem of sort of independent or for hire software developers that are out there that are sort of pushing the boundaries. Right. So when you think in terms of a growing ecosystem, at some point you have to figure out how you're going to start to put some structure behind something that looks like a grassroots movement. So right now I believe that there's 20 Alexa champions that have been recognized by Amazon, and that number is going to grow in 2017 as more people come forward and come up with great products like analytics for voice. And so that's one of the things that where the program is just trying to show, hey, here's different people that have done different things, and it's a way to try to address, one of the points that was called out there was the distribution challenge, right? Because I think that right now you're in this interesting mode of where people don't really realize even what you can do with the platform. It's amazing the number of people you can talk to that they're just impressed the fact that it can set a timer. Right, or that an Alexa could do something other than just play music, and it's really going to be a matter of, hey, how do you actually get some people that are out there and really start to push the boundaries of the ecosystem, and whether that be individuals that are building tools and frameworks, or whether it's individuals that actually write applications. So I'll give you an example. One of the passions that I have outside of tech is music. And to me, being able to play music is it's an interesting thing for all of us to do from an education side. And like the last two skills that I've actually built, one teaches you how to play the piano, and then one teaches you how to play the guitar. So think of it is walking you through the steps of how to play chords and how do you do the fingering on the fretboard. But think of it like stuff like that. People don't even right now recognize what's potentially something that a voice device like that can do. And so that's where, until you actually get sort of the leading edge adoption of things that the technology can enable, we're going to be in this mode of where people are kind of satisfied with, hey, it's a talking speaker and it does some very primitive things.
Yeah, fair.
And it could be that's where the distribution channel right now isn't such that I don't think that people even understand what you can do, right? There's some developers that are out there that are working on sort of voice activated video games, right? Where there's really no sight attached to it, but it's all stuff that you're doing from a voice commands side. I think that there's a couple of sort of good brands that are going cross channel like Jeopardy. And even, my own employer, Capital One, where sort of leading edge development teams that are going off and saying, well, hey, would you like to go ahead and be able to play along with the Jeopardy game in the evening and get sort of an extra question, or in Capital One's case, hey, can you actually find what your balance is in your last couple of transactions? So there's some things that I think that are at the frontier right now. But so much is going to be around how do you actually get people, the millions of people that have actually bought one of these devices, for them to really start to think of it more than just an advanced speaker. That it truly is a new platform, just on par with what a laptop or what an iPhone could do.
And Alex, that probably actually is a great segue into your area as well, because Voice Labs is really focused on analytics and the behind the scenes of the voice services. And so can you give us a sense not only of technology behind the platform, but what are some of the interesting use cases that you potentially see evolving, and how does the analytics play into all of this right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think before I go deep into those, I want to go back to kind of those 4 tenets of that ecosystem, which are the experience, the retention, distribution, and monetization. And before we got started at Voice Labs, we talked to 50 to 100 developers to really understand the needs in the market, right? Because we came, about a year ago, let's say, and we kind of wanted to get a state of how are folks developing? Do they understand how, whether they have retained users or not? How often they come back? Are they having a great experience or not? And we kind of asked all these developers these questions, and most of them said, I don't know. I'm looking at logs. And so, when you think about an ecosystem, the very first thing, to Terren's point about, what are they going to be the killer apps? We thought we would focus on experience. How do we help developers and brands and actually think about experience and actually build a compelling experience? So we essentially, out of all this research, came out in Voice Labs, where we knew people didn't have visibility, and so we wanted to provide that visibility and the tools of the trade, top-notch tools of the trade, for developers to build really cool stuff. So being entrepreneurs, we chose to learn quickly, and we've built a lot of interesting voice-first analytics. Just to give you an example to answer one of your questions in terms of what are the interesting things that we're providing first, we came out with a feature called voice pathing, and this was like very, very voice-first, where for the first time you could visualize conversations and understand which ones were popular and understand where people got confused when they talk to Alexa, because it's not a given still when you talk to an assistant like Alexa that it's going to understand you, right? What is no? The word no, is that K-N-O-W? Is it N-O, right? It's hard for the, for the assistant to understand. And so when you're building these experiences, really, bringing that to the forefront to really understand where confusion happens we found is very important for developers currently at this stage. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And to kind of expand on that slightly as well. So when I was at the AWS conference, and unfortunately, I completely admit he had the crap draw on sessions, but I went to the session by the author of the Magic Door skill, he's an AWS developer, and unfortunately his name slips on my mind right now.
Andy.
Yes, and it was the last session I went to, and I had my bag packed, and I kind of went straight to the airport after the session. But it was really fascinating. The analytics portion was so fascinating to me because the Magic Door app, and for those that aren't familiar, it's almost like an old school text adventure, like you were saying, kind of going back to the beginnings of web and things like that. It was an old school adventure where it's all voice, and then it would prompt you, what do you want to do next? And do you want to go west? Do you want to go north? Kind of thing. But it was interesting he actually wrote his own analytics engine to go along with it so that he could understand completion rates of adventures and where people were getting hung up. And something as simple as seeing this particular state, because at the end of it, it's I'm an old computer science major, it's one big state map. And to figure out the state you're in now and then transition to the next state, well, this might have a 20% conversion rate to the next step.
Right.
What is wrong with that step? And so then he would go and analyze the voice, and he would analyze the patterns, and he would realize, oh, I wasn't clear with this script, or the way I was accepting the input wasn't quite right. And he would make a couple changes, and suddenly it would go from 20% to 90%. Yep. And it was his way of solving this to make sure it flowed accurately and no one got frustrated and quit based off of analytics.
That's exactly right. I mean, the way you're describing it is spot on, and Andy's a great guy. I got to meet him there too. And I think that you touch on a couple things that are very important here. First off, compared to let's say a mobile or a desktop where you have more of a hierarchical, right, predetermined hierarchical way of navigating. In voice, it is a state machine, right? So you can kind of go from anywhere to anywhere based on what the user is saying. And that is a very different paradigm to program. And so you absolutely need a different way of visualizing and thinking through whether experiences are successful or not. And then once you do see, confusion or drop off, one thing that's really interesting about voice is that the conversation is always iterating. It's always moving. And as a developer, we recommend usually when we talk to our customers or developers to really look at this and just be continually iterating on the conversation. We provided this one metric that we think all developers should be thinking through, and that's % successful sessions. And you can kind of, for some organizations, it's easy to be like, here's a KPI, and here's the current state of % successful sessions. How do we make sure as we develop over time that we kind of hold ourselves to a high bar, and that we continue kind of getting to that 100% successful sessions? So 100% with you there in terms of these different flows through the apps and why it's very different in voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Terren, let me ask you this, because this kind of goes back into what you're doing at Capital One that as well. And really, cloud computing has completely reshaped everything we're doing in IT, and in particular, how developers interact with resources. This idea of an API-driven infrastructure, if you will, and everything is kind of flipped over on its head. And how has voice first potentially advanced that even further, or potentially reshaped it even more? And what potential new use cases does that open up?
Yeah. And so like, think about it. And I don't know if you got an opportunity to see one of my colleagues actually did a presentation out there. And Scott Topman, I believe, was out there talking about some of the novelties of voice. Think of it for being a bank, right? Security is number one for us. And if you think in terms of that a voice platform in and of itself, we still have to think through what are the security patterns that are going to be needed for us to be able to secure conversations. I think that some of the far field devices are still trying to work through how to actually do identity, right, beyond just the fact that, hey, you can wake the device and you can start a dialogue, but how is it that we can do things from we're used to sort of protecting the screen, if you will, if we don't want somebody to be able to peer into our conversation. But if we actually have an audible device that's actually speaking what our balance is and said, oh my gosh, I spent $75 at Starbucks last week, how is it that you can actually protect data like that for consumers? We are still just very early days on all that. So that's where some of the some of the thinking still is of just what are the right patterns of how you go ahead and do more commercial transactions and take those offline onto a device like Alexa.
You bring up a great point, because you could still have those communications be encrypted, secure in transit, all these other things, but at the end of the day, there's nothing to prevent me from going to Terren's house and asking Alexa, what charges he's put on his credit card recently, because it doesn't know, whether it's you or me, right?
well, but now to be clear, right? So Capital One has done some great stuff on security of where there's sort of pins and other things.
Sure.
That you can do that, but you're right. There's still some security things of just how do you actually do that? How is it that there's actually confidentiality? I think that one of the funnier video clips that was sort of getting kicked around for the holiday season was where some kid just told Alexa, hey, I want a dollhouse and like some 4-pound can of cookies, right? And the parents didn't even know about it until the stuff showed up on the door, right? Because the Alexa device recognized the person, said, sure, shopping's turned on here, so we can go ahead and get that to your doorstep within a couple of days.
Yeah, which, by the way, disabling purchases was the first thing I did. I wasn't ready to go there with two girls in the house. Now, so kind of next topic here of many people know the physical devices, whether it's Google or Amazon, and really it's those two at this point that I would say are the serious competitors. But we're starting to see capabilities embedded in other devices. You're starting to see, Siri embedded in places and Alexa embedded in places. Like I'm thinking cars, for instance. There's a lot of recent car announcements of one or the other, and there's Huawei has a phone out that is Alexa capable Android phone, and how far do you think this embedding is going to go, and how far will these voice first capabilities expand? Where do you think this is going to go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the next 5 years, I think many of the devices we use today will be manufactured as voice enabled. Keep in mind that there's a big hardware piece to actually doing this with high fidelity. So I think we're going to see a pretty big change. And, you're seeing in the news, Alexa's partnering with TV manufacturers, with car, and Google's doing the same. And I think, that being said, we're talking about the proliferation of this. I think one thing to be objective is not all contexts lend themselves well to voice, right? Whether you're in a meeting, for now, from a culture perspective, you're in public, et cetera. So as a voice industry, we're going to have to figure that out in terms of, what's the right context and how do we, do this well. But I think the next step function will come from, continuing the in-home device. So I think Amazon and Google will continue to expand and fly off the shelf this year. I think leveraging the billions of smartphones, to your point, and these Bluetooth-enabled earphones, a la AirPods, but perhaps third-party, is going to be a really big place where, you can think of really interesting experiences for voice that are going to give scale more immediately. So I think those are some of the things. And then cars, to your point, like commuting will be really interesting to see where that goes with that.
Yeah, and I think that the big wild card out there right now is that I'm not so sure that anybody's come up with a killer app yet. Yep. Right. And that what happens when all of a sudden, if we think to other platforms, right, it's that what's that one utility that someone can figure out that once they see it and they talk to their friends, they talk to their coworkers, that it sort of fuels adoption, to levels that are just not even seen today. So I think that's something that, you look at the Pokemon Go phenomena. What is it that someone's going to come up with like that? And because you already have literally on the Amazon side, you already have 5 million, 7 million devices, something in that range already out there. Hey, if all of a sudden you put a spark out there, the adoption of this is going to really take off. And it could be what differentiates, Google versus Amazon versus Apple or yep. some other third-party player, that they actually figure out what the killer app is. And it actually starts to drive more of the ecosystem than just the devices today.
I couldn't agree more with that. And I think in our voice report, we actually put out two things that we think. If you think about the previous platforms that had hyper growth, whether that's the web, whether that's email or Messenger or Facebook or Snapchat, you think about what they all have in common, and the first thing they have in common is communication. Right? Facebook was a communication tool when I was in college, before it ever had newsfeed. Same thing for Snapchat, and email is the same, right? So communication, I think, Terren, you bring up a really good point around what is that killer app? We believe, communication and doing telephony and opening that up to developers for these devices could be really interesting. The second thing, if you guys remember in 2007 with mobile, one of the top apps was Tap Tap Revenge. Do you guys remember that,
right.
that mobile app?
Right.
Yep.
And one thing that is visceral on a lot of these new platforms are games. Kids kind of run back from school and they're like, I want to play that. I want to do that, And today, there are interesting things like the Magic Door that are very voice-centric. But, we believe that kind of, again, pairing a voice device with a screen can open up a new category of games, whether it's Family Feud across living rooms or, Jeopardy or, Wheel of Fortune or whatever that may be, where you're interacting through your voice and seeing a screen and giving that primitive to developers to build on. that could be a huge differentiator for the platforms. And so, I like to think through those two things from an innovation arm perspective, that if one of them nails those, you're going to see some really cool use cases.
Yeah, and combine one buzzword with another buzzword. If we, combine this voice first with, say, virtual reality, right? Where there's a lot of things that are controlled in virtual reality, but it's controlled through some kind of, things you hold or something like that. But if you could give voice commands while having virtual reality, goggles on or something like that, you could definitely see how this could go in very, very different ways. Because, at that point you're using more than one sense to communicate. So I could absolutely see that being the way going forward. It makes perfect sense. For me, I will say this: the big thing that's the killer app, at least at our house, is the shopping list, because everyone in our house almost overnight trained themselves of, hey, add it to the shopping list. And then when we go to the store, we just pull up our app and we just start checking things off on the shopping list. That was the one thing that immediately overnight changed how we do things in the house. Cause we had this like little notepad down by the fridge and be like, oh, we didn't write it down or what, but now we just add things all the time. And unfortunately we probably buy a lot more, maybe that's what Amazon wanted, but,
and that's hilarious. Yeah.
We're not buying it from Amazon though. We're using the shopping list when we're at like Target or the grocery store or somewhere like that. So let me ask you the last topic here before we kind of close this down here. For those that are out there that really, have listened to this or are kind of starting to see this and get interested, what's the best way for developers to really get started and really dig in with this technology?
Yeah, I'll say, just from a sort of as a developer champion, I think that the GitHub repos that are out there that are under the GitHub.com Alexa page, those are ones that where literally if you just spend an afternoon, you can get them up and running and really start to explore the ecosystem, both on the Amazon developer side as well as sort of the back-end services with something like Lambda to go ahead and enable. So that to me is the best place to get started. I do think that to try to put the plug in there around building that feedback loop in early, because what people will struggle with a little bit, I think, is the, hey, what is it that somebody is actually trying to do with this device? And that's where using something like a voice analytics, is critical to going ahead and understanding, well, what is it that people are actually intending, right? So if you actually sort of get started on a trivia skill, a fact skill, all those things are out there as templates that you can clone out in Alexa's GitHub repo. And then it's just a matter of just sort of exploring, what is it that somebody's actually doing with what you've built and put out on the platform.
Yeah. Thank you, Terren. Yeah, that sounds, we'll take it. We'll take it. Absolutely. And so from my side, I would say this, from a new developer perspective, this is more from the product side of things, but, I would recommend thinking through your passion and the consumer experience, and then think through what is uniquely voice. What are the voice attributes that the Echo provides, whether that's context in the kitchen, whether that means it's always on, and that it's natural. Like, what do those mean? And think through, based on your passion, what you could build that's really interesting. I think Amazon and Google have done a great job developing a skill or action super simple. And to Terren's point, there's some great resources. Terren wrote some really great write-ups for developers starting off. And so I highly recommend checking those out. And then also we wrote the voice report. So if you're curious about kind of the state of the industry, where you should start, what category of applications, are lacking, like that would be a great place to go. And then my last point is for existing developers, if they want to go deep and 100% into the voice space, there's a lot of great accelerator programs that are out there, like VoiceCamp from BetaWorks. And I know Techstars is doing some good stuff. So there's people that are investing in this space, and it's growing rapidly. So we're certainly excited to continue that.
Yeah, and I think David Bitsky, who does the Alexa Dev podcast, and he's kind of the developer evangelist for the community for Amazon, really put it best on one of the previous podcasts where he said, one of the nice things about this is it feels like development, 20 years ago or so, where you can sit there and write everything end to end yourself, which maybe isn't as easy to do with a lot of other technologies that have evolved over the years. Because this is so early on, you can learn everything about the system. You can write everything yourself. You can debug everything yourself. And so it is actually extremely developer friendly or entry level friendly, if you will. It has a much lower barrier to entry than, say, a lot of other technologies that are out there right now.
Yep.
So
definitely.
Very cool. So we're about out of time. So what I wanted to do is, as we're kind of closing things out here, Alex, where can everyone find out more about you, about the company, and what everything you have going on?
Absolutely. I mean, you can come check us out on www.voicelab.co and kind of browse around our blog. There's a lot of interesting use cases and case studies. So I highly recommend anybody interested in building to come check us out and leave us a message. We're happy to chat and help.
Fantastic. And Terren, how about yourself?
So I would definitely encourage people to, in the developer section of the Amazon website, to check out the Alexa Champions pages. There's 20 of us right now. Some great variety in what people have actually built. And you can even link to my page and see some of the blogs that I've written, either on Medium or Hackster, or even look at some of my code.
Fantastic. All right, guys. So on behalf of Brian, who wasn't able to make it this week, thank you very much to both of you. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.